Next, we have Dr. Key.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Cuban director Alejandro Borges's 2011 zombie film, Juan of the Dead, contains many of the tropes that we've come to become accustomed to in zombie cinema. We have a zombie virus that is originally mistaken for something else, a small group of living survivors trying to stay alive as zombies mass on the streets, the creative use of everyday objects as weapons, and an unlikely hero rising to the occasion. In this case, the hero is the titular Juan, who starts the film as an unambitious slacker with no real desire to do anything other than simply be. Even before the start of the zombie infestation, many people are fleeing Cuba for a supposedly better life in the United States, but Juan surmises that it's better to stay where he is because over there he'd have to work for a living. By the end of the film, though, with several of his friends dead and a means of escape at hand, Juan is still holding firm. Not because he's afraid of hard work, but because Juan has come to realize something fundamental about his character, and by extension, the Cuban character more generally. Pushing a boat containing his best friend, his daughter, her boyfriend, and a child that Juan has rescued out to sea, Juan refuses to get on board. He notes, quote, "I'm a survivor. I survived Mariel, I survived Angola, I survived the special period and that thing that came afterwards, and I will survive this. I'm fine here. I like it here." As they sail away, Juan pulls himself back up on shore as the song My Way starts to play, and Juan says to himself, "I'll be all right. I just need a chance." He grabs an oar and starts fighting zombies. This fight, let's see if this works. Yeah. This fight becomes an animated sequence under the end credits of the film, and it ends appropriately enough with the image of a zombie, a hole ripped through its back, wearing a jacket that says "Hasta la victoria siempre," or "Until victory always," a famous line from a letter written by Che Guevara and the inspiration for a 1965 song about the Cuban Revolution written by Carlos Puebla. It's in this moment that the viewer remembers that while at this point zombies may be a global phenomenon, this film is still very much grounded in a very particular national context. And it is in this national context that things become very crucial in how we read this film, because it offers us an opportunity to reevaluate the sorts of assumptions that scholars have been making about cinematic zombies for decades. Assumptions based on the fact that to many, the zombie is, in the words of Kyle William Bishop, quote, "a fundamentally American creation." Now, this might have been an accurate description of the cultural processes that took a creature rooted in slavery from Haitian folklore and transformed it into a cannibalistic ghoul. But today, the zombie has outgrown its ties to American fears of invasion and contamination. It is no longer only an American creature. And yet much of the scholarship on cannibal zombies not only links them to a particular American frame of reference, but also often links them to a particular post-Fordist moment. And while zombies are an easy metaphor for unthinking consumers, the apocalyptic nature of most cannibal-style zombie films also suggests fantasies of trying to escape capitalism, to move past current economic structures, to start a new world order. The zombie apocalypse fast-forwards radical change, providing a fresh start, without the years of collective social work that would actually need to happen for this to happen in real life. In essence, the zombie virus erases all class distinctions without us having to do a thing. Still, living survivors usually face an uphill battle in combating zombies, and they often cling to pre-apocalyptic ways of life. In other words, there's no easy way out of capitalism in most American zombie films. Juan of the Dead provides a slightly different take on the zombie as economic metaphor, though, because it firmly grounds its zombies not in the American heartland, but in Cuba, a contemporary communist space that is already, at least in theory, giving people a life outside of capitalism. In the film, when a zombie apocalypse grips Cuba, the government claims the undead are capitalist dissidents. Most citizens assume it's just another special period, but Juan sees an opportunity. He starts a zombie removal business. He's the ultimate entrepreneur. He'll kill your loved ones, provided you can pay the fee. This is the point I want to focus on. Juan refuses to escape the zombies. He has this capitalist urge in him. We see this when he starts charging to kill loved ones. And yet he does not, take up the offer to go to the capitalist paradise of the United States. Because rather than envisioning Juan as able to combat zombies because of some innate heroism or this capitalist streak in him, this film positions Juan as able to survive a zombie apocalypse because he survived being Cuban for so long. In other words, Cuba's been living its own zombie apocalypse for years. Now, traditionally, zombies have been seen as potent economic metaphors. If early zombies were meant to stand in for slaves or wage laborers, then many scholars have linked cannibal zombies to a post-Fordist moment, the zombies of the mall from Dawn of the Dead in 1978. As Gary Caravan notes, zombies thus map onto a form of capitalism, quote, that has itself become completely monstrous. Now, this can range from scholars who see cannibal zombies as simply another manifestation of exploitation to zombies as harbingers of change. Zombies have been called the working class undead in relation to their more aristocratic vampiric cousins. Other scholars see zombies as less exploited and more as part of the problem. As Stephanie Bullock and Wiley Lenz suggest, cannibal zombies, quote, are creatures composed entirely of excess desire. They hunger for flesh, but their undead status means they don't require food. Yet, as they point out, the zombie not only comes to stand for the unthinking, ever-consuming, mindless consumer, but because they are creatures of the mass, cannibal zombies are also often envisioned as representatives of a proletarian revolution. As they note, quote, the threat the zombie poses is a threat of dismantling social and economic institutions. In this way, the zombie comes to express myriad anxieties about present-day capitalism. The assumption that most of these scholars make, of course, is that zombies are born in capitalist worlds. But do zombies still have the same symbolic connection to capitalism in communist worlds? Well, no, but that doesn't mean that capitalism disappears entirely. Emily Maguire reminds us that while in the 2004 film Shaun of the Dead, quote, Shaun's zombies reveal the lethargy and conformity at the heart of British society, in Juan of the Dead, it gestures towards the death of socialist ideals as it celebrates the survivor instinct and its emerging guerrilla capitalism. As she says, quote, unlike Shaun, Juan has no need to be roused from the stupor of capitalist drudgery. And yet, the film does suggest that Juan needs to be roused from something. And this is why the national context of the film is so important. Gregory Waller observes that zombie texts demonstrate, quote, how easily our bodies, our homes, our cities, our country, and our universe can be invaded. And his linking of bodies with homes and cities and countries is no accident, because there is a true breakdown of the body occurring in most cannibal-style zombie films. Whereas slave-style zombies were hardly ever physically marked, cannibal zombies are almost always physically differentiated. They're decomposing corpses. And as such, zombie texts usually deal with the horrors of the body, a body that cannot conform, it will not hold, a body with very fluid borders, so to speak. As a result, these zombie bodies have almost always stood for the national body as well as the individual body. Hence, early zombie films could deal with the contamination that could occur should the US allow people of color full political participation via the body of slave-style zombies, just as easily as contemporary films can show the threat of terrorists on the national body via cannibal zombies. It's the same in Juan of the Dead, where zombies not only represent a very real threat to Juan and his friends, but they come to represent a threat to the national body as well. Yet the film goes to great lengths to show us, satirically, that the zombies are simply the latest in a long line of threats to the Cuban national body. Hence, most of Juan's neighbors assume that the zombie infestation is just another special period, which is a euphemism for the extended economic crisis in Cuba following the downfall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. And it's also no coincidence that the first zombie to appear in Juan's neighborhood is Mario, the president of the local Socialist Party office, which is appropriately enough called the Committee for the Defense of the Revolution. The film is littered with snarky asides to revolutionary jargon and takes special glee in filling revolutionary spaces, such as the Plaza de la Revolucion, with zombies. Emily Maguire argues that in this way, the film suggests that, quote, revolutionary fervor itself is monstrous. And at first glance, this would certainly fit a film whose tagline is, quote, 50 years after the Cuban Revolution, another revolution is about to break out, and only one man can stop it. Yet, I want to consider for a moment this idea, because I would suggest that we can't simply read the film as a satire of revolutionary ideals, although it certainly does that, just as we can't consider the film as solely a product of Cuba and Cuba alone. First of all, the film was a co-production with Spain, made well outside of the Cuban state apparatus. But more importantly, Borges has made clear that with Juan of the Dead, he was interested in making a genre film that would reach global audiences. And while the film is decidedly set in Cuba and makes references to Cuban life that might be difficult for those outside of Cuba to understand, the film is also constantly referencing zombie cinema more generally, most explicitly the films of George Romero and 2004's Shaun of the Dead. And it is in part because of this that I want to rethink the suggestion that the film positions Cuban revolutionary society as monstrous. While most zombie media today gives lip service to the survivalist instinct in all of us, most American zombie media shows us how this falls apart. You only have to watch 1968's Night of the Living Dead or flip on an episode of The Walking Dead to see how jealousies and petty squabbles can turn the hardiest of survivors into easy prey for zombies. Yet the entirety of Juan of the Dead seems to be set up in such a way that Juan's life as a Cuban, surviving the special period, surviving Angola, surviving all of this other stuff, is what has equipped him to be the person best able and ready to take on the zombies. His survival instinct is an instinct born of being Cuban. Hence his ability to quickly adapt everyday objects into weapons. There's him with his oar and his daughter with a hammer and another hammer. McGuire notes, ironically, the person who shows himself to be best able to deal with the zombie crisis is not the shining example of Cuba's new man, the model socialist individual envisioned by Che Guevara, but someone Guevara might have viewed as a social failure. As she observes, Juan has no political ideals, zero ambition, and is motivated by self-interest rather than altruism. Yet, while she sees this as a sort of capitalist streak in Juan, I contend that yes, Juan has a capitalist streak in him, but his refusal at the end of the film to escape into the capitalist paradise of the United States is compelling. As I stated earlier, the apocalyptic nature of most American cannibal-style zombie films suggests a fantasy of trying to move past current economic structures and envision a new world order. Imagine it. The zombie apocalypse could erase all of our debt. It's all gone. Could also erase systemic racism, sexism, you name it, a host of other social ills. But the problem is usually that we fail to live up to such a fantasy. Living survivors cling to pre-apocalyptic ways of life. Even if these ways of life are shown to be detrimental to a living being, it's usually all that the living survivors have known, and they refuse to give up these ideas. In Juan of the Dead, things also end with Juan clinging to pre-apocalyptic ideals, but instead of these being the ideals of a post-Fordist society, they're communist ideals, at least in part. It's telling that during his speech at the end of the film, when he's sending his daughter and his friends away on their boat, that besides telling them that he is a survivor, Juan says, quote, "Maybe people will see me and join me to help." For all of his slacker ways and his entrepreneurial spirit, for all the ways in which the revolution is mocked, Juan still holds out hope in a cooperative future. It's also telling that the animated fight sequence that plays under the end credits ends with the image of a zombie wearing a jacket that says, "Hasta la victoria siempre." While the zombie may have a hole blown through him, he's still standing and he's still very much a threat. The revolutionary ideas refuse to die. And whether it's Juan's eventual victory or the victory of the zombies, we don't know. We're left in suspense. But the last image asks us to consider if the revolution might be born anew with Juan. Hence, the film gives us the possibility of a post-apocalyptic life after communism that is still very much rooted in its ideals, even if it has interjected a little bit of the capitalist spirit in there as well. And unlike American zombie films, where this usually means the living survivors have failed to move forward, here, this would mean a victory. So while this film follows the trope of the living going back to pre-apocalyptic ways of life, which usually means embracing capitalist ideologies, telling Americans to consume, 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 here Juan doesn't go back to his shiftlessness. He isn't the Juan from the beginning of the film. But he also doesn't abandon life for capitalist life in the United States either. Rather, this is a Juan that in some ways is embracing both his survivalist instincts and a revolutionary fervor. Because revolutionary ideals may be outdated. They may have helped lead to this zombie outbreak, but as the ending of the film implies, they aren't going to die, at least not without a fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Key.